Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Eric Schramm, Director of Major Gifts for the Midwest region at U of M. I enjoy the privilege of working with Michigan friends and alumni in Ohio. I want to recognize Cheryl Chapikas and David Berson for hosting this virtual event. Thank you, Cheryl and David. Today, we have a terrific panel of speakers, including a U of M leader and a number of alumni and business leaders from the Central Ohio region. They will offer an expert perspective on the key sector they represent and discuss the outlook and trends for their sector in Central Ohio. I'm excited to learn what they have to share with us. But first, some housekeeping. Captioning is available during today's program. To view captions, please click on Closed Caption at the bottom right of your screen, and then choose Show Subtitle. And we welcome you to submit questions at any time during today's event. To use the Q&A feature, please type your question in the Q&A window. Now, let's get started. I'm delighted to welcome David Berson as our moderator. David is a proud two-time alumnus, loyal supporter, and volunteer for U of M. And he is currently Senior Vice President and Chief Economist at Nationwide Mutual. At Nationwide, David leads a team of economic analysts to deliver economic forecasts, which makes him perfect to lead our panel today. Welcome, David.
Eric, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. We're very happy you could be here today. We put a lot of time into this, particularly in the selection of the speakers. I'm very excited. As an economist, we look at the outlook for areas for the country as a whole, but living in Columbus, living in Central Ohio, and I've been in Columbus now for almost 9 years. I think it will be very useful for us to have an idea of what things are going to look like, the industry-specific outlooks that our speakers are going to give us today, I think will be invaluable. So I can't wait to hear them. And let me encourage you to put questions out there in the Q&A panel so that we can answer them. If there are things that you specifically want to know that are not addressed by our speakers today, please ask questions. That's the best part of this. So excited to give us our keynote speaker, Kenny McDonald. Kenny is the President and Chief Economic Officer of One Columbus. He has been in economic development for many years. Number of cities: Charlotte, Albuquerque, Savannah, but he's been here in Columbus for a while, and there's nobody who knows economic development, and particularly economic development in the Central Ohio region like Kenny does. Kenny, you're up.
Thank you, David. Pleasure to be with everybody today, and I will do my best to set the context prior to a lot of our partners speaking about individual industries and aspects of our economy in depth. So One Columbus is an 11-county public-private partnership created in 2010, at that time when Mayor Coleman was leading the city of Columbus, who will speak to you in just a moment. We were created with a few goals in mind. Number one, we believed that you had to go to market as a region, and you had to approach the market as a market and not just a few jurisdictions of cities and counties. In our case, that is 11 counties, all of Central Ohio, which encompasses hundreds of phenomenal companies, 17 Fortune 1000 companies, everything from the Honda engineering and manufacturing headquarters to JP Morgan Chase's largest operation outside of New York, to just dozens and dozens of small, mid-sized companies that are growing like crazy, Nationwide's headquarters, on and on and on. A really diverse and fast-growing economy. The second thing that we believed was that you had to have a group that was completely dedicated to working on the economic foundation and the economic base of the region if you're going to move forward. So from 2010 to 2020, that was almost our entire focus, was to set the strategy and to work on that every day. Like, let's call it a growth strategy to be simple about it. And as we approach the end of the decade, And the reason that we changed our name to One Columbus was more than just a marketing event, if you will. And I'm glad we didn't keep the name Columbus 2020, because 2020's brand name is a bit damaged after last year. Was really simple. What we analyzed, and also what we heard from our stakeholders, was that growth wasn't enough. That if we weren't going to be closing gaps in transportation and health and racial inequities that we have within our workforce and within our efforts around wealth creation, that we weren't going to get where we want to be. So that's the reason we're called One Columbus, and our group is the leader of a coalition of public and private and even academic leaders here of 13 colleges and universities that band together to help us work on that. It is a region of 2.3 million people, a workforce of a little over 1.1 million, and growing. The last reliable numbers that we had were about 50,000 people were moving to our region every year. More than half of those were moving inside the city of Columbus, and the rest were spread around our region. So a fast growing region. In fact, when you look at the decade-long population trend, the metro market was the fastest growing in the Midwest for population and for GDP growth. Our GDP growth had stalled a little bit from 2000 to 2010, and so those numbers grew substantially. And it became, quite frankly, a much bigger market. Now the city of Columbus is actually the largest city in Ohio, just in and of itself. So a little bit about where we're starting 2021. Where are we now? Our economy, I think the unemployment figures came out yesterday at 4.7%. And, I always discounted the unemployment number. I will say I have to heavily discount that now, because we'll have a job fair that we're participating in just a week or two. There's over 2,000 open positions, and I think for not only our region but for the rest of the country, labor force participation is both a mystery and the number one activity that we have to continue to work on. Whether that is our partners at Ohio Health helping to get vaccines in people's arms so that they feel safe going back to work and safe being around their coworkers, or all the other obstacles that have been put in front of us over the last 10 months. Labor force participation rates are going to be really something very interesting to watch over time, and that's something that we're keeping our eye on. The pre-existing conditions before the pandemic are something that I'm talking about a lot. And what I refer to there is we had started an economic transformation far ahead of the pandemic. If I look at the 6 or 7 sectors that we focus on a constant basis and are working with our own companies and with companies around the world to recruit to the market, in automotive and mobility, in finance and insurance, and fin and insurance tech, in logistics and e-commerce, and retail technologies. Every one of those industries was being transformed, at least modestly, prior to the pandemic, and it accelerated greatly through the pandemic, meaning that we have to be working with our companies closer than ever, not just to merely survive, but to really think about the future competitiveness of their industry and their company itself. Our group conducted about 415 detailed interviews with companies across our region over the last 6 months, learning about those obstacles, finding great growth opportunities, quite frankly, in many of the companies. There was many companies were having record years through 2020. What we found with everybody is that they were really focused on, accelerating their plans by 3, 4, 7 years in some cases, and some being very successful at it, some being really challenged by that. The other thing is just workforce challenges. So we went into the pandemic with incredibly high participation rates and very low unemployment, and a very big obstacle is just filling all the open positions in Central Ohio. In fact, it was kind of providing a ceiling on a bit of our growth. That continues to be a problem. And we always find workers for growing companies, but it is just an incredible struggle as companies want to grow to try to prove that you can actually find those people. So workforce skill sets, reskilling, labor force participation are all things that we're partnering with dozens and dozens of partners on. And I would argue that's probably the biggest challenge for any metro area in the country right now. And then, I talked about closing gaps as we pursued growth. The way I like to describe it is that we want to embed activities and the idea of equity in every activity that we undertake. So if we're talking to our companies about being competitive, we're talking to them about their ESG strategies. And we think that's something that actually could help them, further their competitiveness. And more of our companies, not just our Fortune 500 companies, but more of our mid-sized companies are actually looking at their sustainability and their diversity and equity as a competitiveness issue and a sustainability issue for the firms. And we're seeing great progress in that. And there's been a reckoning and an awakening, I think, in that arena that is coming back to roost in economic development circles. And then finally, never more important to actually have a comprehensive strategy. So what we're seeing is we have a solid base. We can't count on all of our companies being successful at pivoting to the future. We're going to continue to recruit new companies to the market. We've been quite successful over the last 10 years at that in the areas of advanced computing and finance and insurance. And now we're seeing a huge influx of industrial development and e-commerce and manufacturing, including the continued regionalization of manufacturing around the world. I wouldn't call it reshoring, but I would call it regionalization, a big boom in that. Our pipeline is very full of industrial activities. We even have some beginnings of office activity, believe it or not, which I think Mr. Merkel will like to hear me say, but it's true. We have some seeds of some companies thinking about how they're going to get back into an office, maybe bring hundreds of people back at somewhere in the summer or the fall. And then finally, really tripling down our efforts around high growth companies. So it's very popular to talk about small business, and I could talk for hours about it. Our particular focus is around a very particular type of small business that is a high growth venture backed company, both starting them here and helping to scale them, but also bring new capital into our state and even recruit those companies from the coast into our part of the country, which I'll brag for a minute. We are the 5th largest economy in the world in the Midwest, constantly bragging about the metropolitan markets. We believe we're on the top quartile of that list of metro areas. And I think the more we work together, the greater success we're going to have in the Midwest. What lies ahead is, I think, probably the most exciting economic development time in the last 25 years, both for me as a professional in terms of the challenges ahead of us, but quite frankly, the growth opportunities within our metro markets, the challenges ahead of us around the changing tax systems, the way that the workforce is going to come back to work, will not just be interesting in terms of the kind of furniture we're going to have to buy or not buy, but it's going to have incredible implications on local and state tax structures as they adjust to the future of work. And I think that's going to kick off just a huge arena of debates and discussions and changes across the Midwest in particular. And so I'm not only excited to do this professionally, but I'm excited about where I'm doing it, which is, I think, going to be an area of great innovation. Finally, I think we have an enormous opportunity to break through some of the ceilings that have been limiting the Midwest as people reassess where they want to be located in the country or maybe the world. There will be more location decisions in the next 3 years than there has been in the last 10. every enterprise has to address where they're going to work, how they're going to work, how they're going to invest in real estate and their workforce. And that hasn't always been the case. It's been a differentiator for some, not all, and now it's a mandate. And we're all going to have a lot of work to do to adjust to that new world. So I hope that gives you just a little context of how we're thinking about things. And I can't wait to hear from some of our great partners as we proceed. I'll hand it back over to David.
Thank you very much, Kenny. Very interesting. That 4.7% unemployment rate seems very low. Perhaps it is, but in comparison to the U.S., the unemployment rate was 6.7% in December, and we're below 5%, and they're counted the same way. So whether the number in an absolute sense is right or not, we're doing much better than the U.S. on average. So our next speaker is Professor Elizabeth Moji, who's the Dean of the School of Education at U of M. Very interesting background. Was a high school teacher, biology and history, and I was a history major as an undergrad, so I love history courses. Doing some very innovative things in the education area in the city of Detroit. Hopefully she'll be talking about that and talking about the future in the near term, what they're doing now and what education is likely to be like going forward. So Dean Moji, you're up.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, David. And I'm really appreciative to all of you for being here. It's really exciting to talk to a group of alumni who care so much about education and the economy. Also, although I am a Michigander through and through, I have a soft spot in my heart for Columbus because my family is from Columbus. This is just like the best of all worlds. It's also really exciting having heard about One Columbus to hear Mr. McDonald talk about some of the exact same things I'm going to talk about. So it's always great when a panel comes together like that. So I'm going to argue, of course, that education is the central ingredient for a healthy, just economy in which all people can thrive. And I'm also going to argue for partnerships, the kind described in One Columbus. I think it's very, very exciting. And it's great to know that you're connecting with universities and other parts of the education sector. I want to talk about 3 key areas of development that I think are central to this work. And all of these are wrapped around the idea of justice and equity. So first, I'm going to also talk about workforce development and the future of work. Second, the issue of human development. And third, the issue of educator development. And these are intersecting. They can't live without each other. So the first, you already heard Kenny talk about workforce development and the just dramatic need to really better educate our children and youth in a whole range of different kinds of skills. Now they have to learn to work more online and virtually, but we need coding and programming skills. We need data analysis skills. We need the skills of communicating and working in teams and being able to discern fact from fiction. All of those are key ingredients that are necessary in education, and we have to stop doing business as usual in education, where children sit in desks and learn from someone lecturing at them. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what we're doing on that score. I also want to mention just something about the state of Ohio's financial literacy requirement. I think it's a very interesting requirement, and what I would love to encourage you to think about is not just financial literacy skills so that people can manage their own portfolios, but what are the financial literacy skills necessary for ensuring that everyone in society can benefit from the economy, that everyone can be a player in that economy? And that leads to the human development piece that I want to talk just a bit about. We want to make sure in education that we're not just building the future workers. We want people who are happy and healthy. And we have to start with the recognition that actually, if your health needs aren't met, if your basic needs aren't met, it's going to be very difficult to learn. So lately I've been talking about the health determinants of learning. And I want us all to think about what we need to do from, early childhood forward to ensure that children are coming to school fed, with good mental health, good physical health, good oral health. And again, I'll talk about what we're doing in Detroit on that score. We also need to think about human development in terms of how we teach children to welcome diversity of thought, not just retreat to their echo chambers and listen to only people whose perspectives they share. And there again, that question of how to discern fact from fiction and be good decision makers. We won't have children who can lead the future if they actually can't think about others and think about the community first. And this is a really important issue given the effects of the pandemic. So a major trend pre-pandemic. Number one thing I heard from teachers that they're dealing with is trauma across the socioeconomic spectrum. So they're struggling with how to support the social and emotional and cultural and communal needs of their students. Again, that was pre-pandemic. So coming back, when we do, we hope we do soon, we're going to have to really think about children who are angry, they're afraid, they're lonely, they're depressed, and what are we going to do for educators to prepare them to really meet the needs of those children? And so that's the third area I want to just touch on, and that's educator development. Frankly, we are not doing our best work in educator development in this society. We, of course, think we are at the School of Education at the University of Michigan, but we know that more needs to be done. We need to prepare teachers as professionals, and we need to hold them to really high standards, but only if we're giving them the preparation they need. They need to learn digital tools. They need to learn how to deal with trauma-informed practice. They need how to learn to teach literacy more effectively. And there's a whole range of things that teachers need to be expert in. And we're just not cutting it on that score. And I'd love to talk more about that with you. And by the way, we also have a looming teacher shortage, a real crisis. So how will we prepare children to lead the future of work if their teachers aren't prepared to help them do that? So what are we doing in Detroit? David mentioned this unique partnership. Indeed, we are partnering with the Detroit Public Schools Community District and a number of community organizations to build a prenatal to graduate school education space on the grounds of a former college that sadly had to close. And in that space, we are educating children in project and place-based methods that focus on design thinking, engineering, and social justice. So they are being taught that they are leaders designing change. At the same time, we are educating teachers in that school. So we're providing a 3-year teaching residency beyond their certification. So they go through our program, we prepare them, and then they get 3 years of additional support at no cost to them. We're also building wraparound supports so that the children get the very best healthcare that they need and extracurricular opportunities. And then teachers can do their very best work because they're supported in this healthy environment. And then finally, we're studying all of it because, of course, we're a research institution. We're evaluating ourselves to hold ourselves accountable, but we're also studying this proof of concept to think about how universities can use their very best resources to not only educate their own students, but also provide the very best education for children. So I could talk about this endlessly, as my friends know. I know my time must be up, so I'll just say I hope that you'll ask questions about this partnership in the time that we have in Q&A. And thank you so much for this opportunity to talk with you. And of course, go Blue.
Thank you very much, Demoji. Very interesting. I think that's some greatly innovative work you guys are doing in the Detroit area. Next speaker, I think we're all very excited to hear from him. Steve Markovich, who is the president and CEO of Ohio Health. And we all know Ohio Health, one of the largest health providers in the state of Ohio. What's interesting is he's also a family physician and has military relationships as well. Recently, the commander of the Ohio Air National Guard. My son is a pilot, not a military pilot, but he loves to fly. He lives to fly. That he just loves that. He has a BS degree from the University of Michigan, 1980. And Stephen, we're all very interested to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, I graduated from the College of Engineering way back in the 80s before everything moved out to North Campus. So my great memories of Michigan. I did go on to medical school at Ohio State, so some people think I'm a little conflicted, but rest assured, after 4 years in Michigan band and being from outside Detroit, I'm never conflicted, especially at the end of November, regardless of how things are going. I'll spend a couple of minutes just orienting you to the Columbus healthcare market, and then we'll talk a little bit about the future. I'll try to be careful to make sure I may talk about some global market information versus some Ohio Health specific information as to how we're doing. As you said, the Columbus metro area is dominated by three really high quality adult healthcare systems: Ohio Health, the Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center, and then Mount Carmel Health. Ohio Health, we're a multi-hospital system. We've got 12 hospitals across 47 counties, but about 60% of our volume in our business in the 3 million or so patients we serve each year is in the Columbus metro area. So as Columbus goes, to a large extent, Ohio Health goes. We are the second largest employer in the region and a major contributor to the healthcare effort here. You've also got Nationwide Children's Hospital. It's the major pediatric institution in the region, a number 8 hospital on the US News World Report, Best Children's Hospitals. And it's interesting that over time, all the adult hospitals in the region have transitioned all their pediatric care to children's. So even if you have a baby at Riverside or at Ohio State, and if they need critical care services within those institutions, it's going to actually be provided by children's. So that's kind of a unique thing in Columbus. All the systems in town provide great care. And unlike a lot of other communities, as I talk to my peers across the nation, the healthcare systems, we collaborate at a very robust level. Now, we've got at Ohio Health about 47% market share for the care delivered in the region. And we generally maintain a margin of about 5% on a $5 billion book of business. And maintaining an AA2 credit rating is very important to us. I throw those numbers out as we think to the current time in the future in view of COVID. If you look at the last fiscal year combined with this fiscal year, we will probably average out to that normalized 5%. So right now, despite COVID, economically, Ohio Health, as well as the other systems, we're doing pretty well. And I think that's why one of the reasons I'm bullish on healthcare. Folks should know too that there's no tax subsidy in the region. For healthcare, there's no charity hospital, there's no county hospital. We all should be really proud of the fact that every institution is open to whomever needs our services. And we all approach the market with a strong sense of stewardship. So every institution is financially strong, and that allows us to stay committed to the patients we serve, regardless of their ability to pay. If you look to the regions around the Columbus metro area, a lot of those smaller institutions, especially coming out of COVID, they're under tremendous economic pressure. And this is creating opportunities for consolidation in the market. There are a number of conversations underway looking at smaller institutions merging with larger institutions, either through full M&A or for clinical agreements. But Columbus is a great place for healthcare because virtually any service you would need that's available across the United States, you can get it in Columbus. It's performed at a very high level, either by all of the systems in town or select systems or hospitals based on their technical expertise. You think about Ohio State, they play a big role as the dominant medical research organization in the market. They have a number of recognized clinical programs. They've got a great medical school that produces 200, 250 physicians a year, as well as a lot of other clinical professionals. Ohio University out of Athens, they have a branch medical school out in Dublin, one of the suburbs, that produces about 50 docs a year. Grant Medical Center is one of the busiest trauma centers in the nation. Riverside's one of the busiest cardiac neuroscience and obstetric programs in the Midwest. And all the hospitals in the region are teaching hospitals for postgraduate education like residencies and fellowships. And we all have a big focus on training physicians who we hope will stay in this market. We try not to be a big outsourcer of talent when it comes to the healthcare market. We've all worked together to develop actually an identical charity care policy so that we work collaboratively to try to figure out what the most pressing community needs are and the best way to solve them. So I keep coming back to this idea of collaboration. And if you think about that, we really demonstrated that during COVID. Each of the 4 CEOs, we still meet every week to talk about our issues in COVID. Our chief medical officers meet every day to make sure we're providing the best possible and most highly collaborative care for the community. We work with the City of Columbus and Franklin County on their leadership on clinical needs, especially things like how do we approach this vaccination crisis that's facing us right now. And we've collaborated on a lot of other clinical activities to support the people we serve, whether it's the opioid epidemic, infant mortality, early stroke intervention, global access to care, especially when it has to do with the underserved. So there really is a collaborative approach. But at the same time, it is a highly competitive market. As each of us tries to grow market share, we try to attract and retain the best talent, and we try to provide the best care for our patients. So if you think about the market, healthcare services in this market are expected to grow about 2% by 2025, and that's above organic population growth. If you look at our market, we are aging, and as we age, we tend to be higher consumers of healthcare. So there will be growth in the consumption of services over the next 5 to 10 years. And just like the rest of the country, we're seeing a migration or a shift from hospital-based services to more ambulatory services, which is not unlike anything you'd see in any other community. But as fast as the business seems to move from inpatient to outpatient, we end up backfilling with more complex cases that are being referred in from across the state. Because some of the big systems like Ohio Health and Ohio State, we essentially become the safety net for large regions of rural Ohio. So just as fast as we migrate, we fill back up. And that's driving acuity up for the healthcare system. It's creating periodic stresses on our overall capacity. And so sometimes we run at 100% occupancy, which leads to discussions about capital and building and beds. There's a long history of investment for the community by all 3 systems. Nationwide Children's is partway through an $800 million multi-year expansion. Well, a few years ago, the Ohio State University opened up the James Cancer Center. Nationwide recently opened up a pediatric cancer center. At Ohio Health, we just did a 400,000 square foot expansion at one of our hospitals, and Mount Carmel just opened up a whole new hospital down in Grove City. And that's fairly recently looking in the rearview mirror. If you look forward, Ohio State right now is in the middle of a $2 billion main hospital replacement project. And both Ohio Health and Mount Carmel are going to open new major facilities, some hospital-based, some outpatient during that same time period. So there is major capital investment that has been going on and will continue to go on for healthcare in the Columbus metro area for some time. At the same time, we're relooking at how we optimize our brick and mortar footprint. We've all adopted a more aggressive work from home position. We're trying to evolve our care models away from the traditional face-to-face visits with your provider. We're trying to create a greater focus on telemedicine, video visits, and become what we would call more consumer facing in terms of what our patients need and how we deliver it. But as Kenny mentioned, the economic position in Columbus is great, and it's a very advantageous place for healthcare. We've got low unemployment, we've got the state capital, we've got major teaching institutions, and having other major markets within about 90 minutes by air is really conducive to recruiting, retaining talent, as well as growing our business. There are other factors that play into this, and I can speak for Ohio Health. If you look at the 5 major payers outside the government that we deal with, or the insurance companies that we deal with, the market is relatively well balanced. There is no dominant insurance company in this market. And that keeps the price negotiation process more of a level, what we would consider more of a level playing field. When you look at other states or other parts of the country where it may be dominated by 1 or 2 payers, it completely changes the healthcare economic infrastructure. So that is a really important part of how we deliver care. In addition, we're still in a fee-for-service market here. You know, when you look at other parts of the country that have moved to what you might call value-based or risk-based which are much more common on the East and West Coast, where the hospitals take risk in terms of their payments in exchange for the care they deliver. Columbus is still a little bit slow to adopt, and we're still very much in a fee-for-service market. So that, while it may seem a little bit traditional, it has kept the economics fairly stable for us. And as I mentioned up front, one of the things I'm most proud of is that strong commitment that Columbus has got to care the underserved. It is, if you have a clinical condition in this town if you need sick care services, accessibility is really, really strong. We do continue to struggle, though, for challenges on the outpatient side related to prevention and wellness, obesity, diabetes, substance abuse, smoking. So we struggle with some of the same issues that the rest of the country has when you're not necessarily in acute distress. The economics of healthcare force us to look for 3 to 5% opportunity for improvement in our productivity and our cost structure each year. We're always trying to balance the cost of recruiting and retaining the best talent, the cost of easy access, the cost of technology, with the cost that patients and employers and government has to pay. So that is always a focus for us. But I think we do a good job in Columbus, and that's another advantage for us. So in closing, I'm very positive about healthcare and the healthcare systems in Columbus. It's growing. The systems are economically stable. It's a very values-based community, and that's how we approach the market. While it is very competitive, I think we're all committed to improving the health and welfare of the people we serve. So with that, I'll turn it back to David and get some questions later.
Thank you very much, Dr. Markovich. Very interesting. It is a comfort to know that in Columbus, we are living in an area that I think does so well with medical services. I think we'd be hard pressed to find a comparable city that had better medical services we have here in Columbus. And my guess is that's one of the items in Kenny McDonald's toolbox when he is doing economic development work. Thank you very much. So our next speaker is Jim Merkel, who's the founder and CEO of Rockbridge. Rockbridge does hospitality funds and hotel investments in a number of states across the country. They happen to be here in terms of headquarters, but they're in a number of places around the country. And Jim has an AB degree from U of M in '96. So he's a young guy. You couldn't have had me as a professor. I'd left 14 years before that, Jim. But you are up now. Can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Thanks, David. Appreciate that introduction. And I want to first thank Michigan for having me today, and had an amazing experience. I love Columbus, grew up in Columbus, but Ann Arbor is just a special place, and happened to, this just kind of happened. 4 of our leaders of our company are all from the University of Michigan. So we've somehow come back together here organically. We're in the hospitality business, and have been doing that as a firm for 20 years, and invested in 288 investments. And the thing that's great about hospitality and hotels that I felt I was going into an investment job, and ended up working for a guy that was in the hotel business. But what happens in the hotel business is really a microcosm of what's happening in our country from a consumer standpoint. And I've really enjoyed it. And when you see what happened this past year in 2020, this was our third black swan event that we went through, and you get a little bit better every time when you go through it. And David, I was a history major as well. So as a history major, you study the past events to try and do it better in the future. And so going through this experience was unlike any of our prior cycles. And hospitality, what was sad about it is that we lost 85% of our demand, and basically didn't have a viable business when the country shut down in March. And that that kicked us into a place where we had to resize our operations and had to furlough thousands of employees. And we've been managing cash and working through that in over the last 9 months. Columbus, I want to say that enjoyed hearing Steve's comments about the healthcare system, but that's a microcosm of how this community is. It's an extremely collaborative environment, and what you see in the healthcare and the foundation that's provided there is what makes Columbus a great place to invest. And then you add the work that Kenny and Mayor Coleman, both while he was in office, and the foundation that he laid for economic prosperity. You've created an environment here in Columbus that is a great place to live and work and invest, and that's been an advantage for us from a corporate standpoint, where we've been located here, from the beginning. But from an investment standpoint, which I'll speak to in a moment, the investment opportunity in Columbus is very well positioned for our business because of all the things that have and all the groundwork that has been laid, and the economic environment here in Columbus. And so as David mentioned, we invest across the country, and I like to tell people that you can't sell what you don't have. And one of the things that Columbus didn't have, it didn't have the investment in hospitality, in hotels that people wanted. And so Columbus, from a hospitality standpoint in the market, going forward, its best days are ahead of it because of that. And one of the things that we are fortunate to be working on, we're working on a project down on the Sauda Peninsula, and which is a project that's 30 years in the making, that the public and private components of Columbus have come together and really created an incredible development opportunity for our city. That's 20 acres in the heart of our downtown, which will become a new downtown, if you will, and be all new product. As Kenny said, there's an office component. We're doing the hotel, and then there's a multifamily component, developing the first 6 acres of the site. And what we're doing is we're investing for the long term, and this happens to be in an opportunity zone, and it's an opportunity to, by definition, you need to invest in it for 10 years and beyond. And so that's the mindset, working with the city, working with the Columbus Development Group there and the other developers. It's been a collaboration, and again, a microcosm of how Columbus works from an economic standpoint. We all are trying to help each other win and make the place, make Columbus a better place to do business and live. So that's one project that we're working on, and a little bit about that project is we'll speak to a little bit to hospitality and what's happening in the hospitality market. COVID will, and we've gotten tons of questions about how is this going to change hospitality forever? Is it going to change hospitality forever? And what it will do, it is an inflection point, but hospitality, hotel stays will hit all-time highs again. I don't know exactly when, we're not clairvoyant, but it will hit all-time highs. The current thinking is in 2023 or 2024. And And so what we're trying to do now in all our projects is align our physical property and the experience in the hotel to what people want now and what trends are out there. And one of the trends that that you see, that you may see in going and staying in hotels, is that the hotels that are getting designed today have more customization, more trying to be more integrated with the local community, trying to give people from out of town a little lens into what it's like to live in Columbus or be a part of Columbus. And it's really driven by the millennials and that generation. They travel 2 to 3 times more than the prior generation of baby boomers. And so where in hospitality, you actually have more demand. People are traveling more. They want more experiences that are unique. They want to, we live in this world where technology is at the same time connecting us, it's disconnecting us. And so people are looking for experiences to travel to other towns, to get emotionally connected to the community or to relationships. And we're trying to develop hotels that meet that demand. And Columbus is on the rise. The product's not here. We think the projects that we're working on will be accretive to everybody here. We're trying to grow the overall experience and drive performance to the market. We as a comparison, we're invested in Nashville. Nashville's a little bit ahead of Columbus certainly from a hospitality standpoint, and the average rate of Nashville is almost $100 more than Columbus, and so part of that is that they have the investment and they have the product that people are willing to pay more. It's the same customer that's coming to Columbus that is going to Nashville as well and paying more. And so why is that? Part of it is that the product is providing a value that people are willing to pay more. And so that's what we're trying to do here is, elevate and fill a void where the market doesn't exist. Another project that I'll mention that is the North Market. There's a project, and Mayor Coleman's on here, who's been a consultant of ours on that project and helped us work on that. And our goal there is that is in the A+ location, in our opinion, right adjacent to the convention center and the arena district, and the Short North are our vibrant areas of our downtown, and that is just an A+ location. But the unique part of that is, again, this public-private working together to try and create something more. Kenny said earlier that growth is just not enough, and I think that's very true. That's been our experience here. And for us, just doing another deal and making money is just not enough. We want to do projects that people are proud of, that create value for not just the investors, but for the community. And this was one that we were blessed to get involved with, where the core reason for this project to come about was to provide economic sustainability to the North Market, which is one of 4 remaining public markets, the longest running public markets in the country. And it's a beloved asset of the city and the community. And this project is designed to make the North Market economically viable. not just from the purchase of the property and the economic contributions from our deal, but also driving awareness from the outside, out of town folks that are traveling to Columbus, and driving more visibility and traffic, and creating this social good for the market, the market entrepreneurs that are in some cases it's their first outlet or storefront, and it's intended to generate economic activities. In fact, Jenny's Ice Cream is one of the got their start at the North Market, and so it's really exciting to be a part of that, and we're putting our shoulder into it with the city and with the not-for-profit, the North Market, and us to create something special that the city can be proud of, the community can be proud of, that creates a social good, but then also presents the city to out-of-town guests in a positive light, and creates another another positive component of our downtown. I will end here with just the outlook. I'd mentioned 2023, 2024, and then also the trends driven by COVID. One of the things is what we're doing today. I wish we were together today. I think most people don't look at Zoom as a replacement to face-to-face meetings. It is going to be a complement. I think it's dislocating the conference call as much as it's changing the way people will travel in the future. And it's our job, and it's our industry's job to adapt and change and create experiences and places that people want to be, that can accommodate how people travel in the future. And so it's going to, the market is going to come back. Zoom and this experience is going to be a part of our lives, but it's going to change travel. It's not going to displace. Certain trips will not happen as often, and other high value, maybe culture building events will take on greater focus. So the future is bright for hospitality. When we look at development, those are our favorite deals right now, because we weren't expecting to have any income from them, and so we get to move those forward and open those up into a market that's much more robust. So appreciate being on with this great panel, and look forward to some questions during Q&A. So thanks, David.
Great, Jim. Thank you very much. Very informative. So our next speaker, somebody I work with and see often in the building, is Mike Mahaffey, who's the Executive Vice President and Chief Strategist and Head of Corporate Development at Nationwide. And Mike has an MBA from the Ross School in 2002, and is one of the most insightful people that I work with, and a whole building full of insightful people at Nationwide. Mike's going to talk about financial services broadly in his comments now. So Mike, you're up.
Thank you, David. I don't see a lot of people in the building these days, but so it's a pretty thin crowd if you're comparing me to who's in the building. But thanks for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to be surrounded by some U of M alumni, even if virtually. I'm going to focus my comments on the trends as they pertain to insurance and financial services. So for those who are less familiar with Nationwide, we're an insurer, personal lines, commercial lines, specialty lines, and financial services in a variety of different businesses. So The timing of this discussion is actually fortuitous. We, every January we refresh as part of our strategy process our view of these long-term trends. And, this is an annual exercise that we refresh and look out over 5, 10, 15-year horizons. And obviously that's an interesting exercise to go through in the wake of COVID that so dramatically accelerated a lot of the things we've been looking at. And so we look at 3 major buckets. The first are environmental trends, or those things that we think shape the macro operating environment in which our businesses compete. Technological trends is the second category. Obviously, the application of new technology to drive our business models, our products, our services, the competitive landscape. And then the third is societal trends. Those things, shifting demographics, consumer preferences, the types of things that drive the needs for the products and services we provide. So let me just double click into each of those categories and highlight a handful of trends. First, on the environmental front, a big one for us as an insurer is climate change. So we really want to look at, as a large property insurer, how are the frequency and severity of these various weather events shifting? And some interesting data points that those of you who are not in insurance may not track as closely as we do, but on the wildfire front. So 2020 set yet another record in terms of wildfire activity. We had 4.2 million acres burned. We had 5 of the top 20 largest state wildfires ever recorded. And that's coming on the heels of 2017 and 2018, which were successively record years by themselves. So you have, 3 of the last 4 years setting successive records for acres burned and damage reigned. On the hurricane front, in 2020, we saw another record broken with the most number of named storms in the Atlantic hurricane basin, over 30. That cycles through the alphabet. Those of you who know how we name storms, it starts with A and moves through the alphabet. This time we had to cycle back around and repeat several letters. So dramatic uptick in hurricane activity. Convective storm, that's thunderstorms, tornadoes, the things that hit the Midwest predominantly. And if you weren't familiar with the term derecho, you probably became familiar with it in 2020. We had the costliest Midwestern storm in US history at $7.5 billion. That's basically an inland hurricane, if you want to think of it that way. So you could go on and on with weather statistics, but climate change is a big driver of property damage, obviously. And these are multi-year trends in the making that we pay very close attention to, that have real ramifications for the availability and the affordability of insurance. So that's trend number 1. Another one I'd highlight in the environmental area is interest rates. So, in the wake of the Great Recession, we saw long-term interest rates trending downward. And as David knows, he and I have engaged in this discussion many times over the last decade. Everyone's been waiting for mean reversion, for the return to normal of when interest rates would rise. So for our business, and for many of our products and services, that long-term risk-free rate of return is a critical ingredient to the value proposition of a lot of our products and services, to the valuation of different businesses, to the returns you earn on the asset side of the balance sheet. And so we're hovering now at a 10-year treasury rate that's right around 1%, which is double what it was over the past year. That's remarkably low, and it's stayed that way for a long term. So we've adopted this view of lower for longer. This is a long-term decline in risk-free rates, and that has a lot of ramifications for how we think about our businesses, the availability and affordability of capital that flows to transactions, and all manner of the valuation of the products and services that are provided in financial services. Let me touch on bucket number 2, technological trends. A big one is, what I might broadly call the digitization of the value chain. So the application of new technology to digitize the very products and services that we offer, individual customer journeys, interactions, how you file a claim, how you purchase a product, how you interact with the companies. They can be the digitization of internal processes to remove costs. So robotic process automation, and things that really do change the cost structure of the companies that are providing these products and services. It was interesting for those who track Microsoft. They had their earnings call yesterday. It was a beat across the board, and you heard Satya Nadella refer to the dawn of a second wave of digital transformation that's sweeping every company and every industry. And so digitization is not new. But COVID, like many things, had a massive effect on the acceleration of the adoption of digital technologies in all manner of industry. Another one I'd highlight in technology is just data, the explosion of data. And in our business in particular, we don't manufacture physical goods. We're not a widget factory. Data is the primary ingredient in what we do in pricing and transferring risk. And the sources of data have exploded. The nature of data, the richness of data, the volume of data, and the compute power that goes with translating that data into insight and artificial intelligence and machine learning that can be applied to that really has an unbelievable potential to unlock new sources of value and transform our industry. So a massive trend there. And then the last thing I'd probably highlight in that category is a transition that I think you're going to continue to see from product to platform. And that is, instead of thinking of traditional product silos of insurance or transactional risk transfer, how do companies move to unlock even more value for the customers they serve by creating the right ecosystems or the right protection platforms that can serve multiple needs in a more engaging manner. So think of it as moving from episodic to truly engaging. You've seen this in other categories as well. Peloton's a good example in fitness. I could go on and on there, but we're seeing that in our space as well. Obviously, all of those things have huge ramifications for what Dean Moji referenced in terms of workforce of the future and skill set trends. So both the scarcity of the required skills, the mobility of those skills in a virtual environment, what companies need to do to reskill and upskill. So huge trends there. And then the last bucket of societal trends that are important for us, a couple of ones we're watching. The bifurcation of wealth. This is not a new trend. This has been 50 years in the making. But again, in the COVID recovery, you've heard a lot of people talk about a K recovery, where different classes are recovering at a different clip, on a different trajectory, at different timing. But the separation of wealth accumulation in the top 1% versus everyone else has huge societal ramifications, including for the needs of protection and wealth accumulation. Aging of America. This is one that Dr. Markovich mentioned, not just in terms of ramifications for the consumption of healthcare, but 10,000 people a day turn 65 in America. And that means you got a lot of people that are moving from wealth accumulation to decumulation, how they prepare for and ultimately live in retirement. Massive trends in shifting consumer preferences. We've talked a little bit about the changing roles and expectations of corporations moving beyond investor to broader stakeholder considerations. Those are all trends we see continuing. And then population migration, which is an interesting one that's happened over, obviously, since the dawn of the country, but you see migrations to the south to warmer climates. And now with COVID, the advent of work anywhere, potentially, travel anywhere, as Jim Merkel mentioned. So what are the ramifications for where people will choose to live and work? And I mentioned throughout, COVID accelerated many of those things that would have taken years to mature and reach tipping points. We saw accelerate into months and into weeks in different ways. Digital adoption, low interest rates, right when we thought things would shoot right back up. It looks like they'll stay low for longer, population migration trends. And so let me close with just maybe, I've rattled off a whole bunch of change and a whole bunch of risk factors. Perhaps to summarize where I think this translates to outlook for the industry. In our business, all of that change, all of that risk actually points in my mind to greater future demand for protection services, whether it's macroeconomic uncertainty, the struggles of wealth accumulation and preparing for and living in retirement, protecting your home from climate change, digital security, cybersecurity, all of those things point to uncertainty. And in fact, I'd say for insurance and financial services, I think that points generally to a different but very bright future. So I'll stop my comments there, David, and I'll also end with a go blue and turn it back to you.
Mike, thank you very much, Mike. When I said you were one of the most insightful people in the building, I wasn't thinking of the fact there are only about 5 people in the building these days. Even when it's full, you're still one of the most insightful. So our next speaker is Kris Kramer. Kris is the Chief Operating Officer for Bath & Body Works, part of L Brands, my youngest daughter's absolutely favorite store in the world. So hopefully your Christmas sales went up with the gift certificates I bought for her. But Kris has also been with IBM and Anderson Consulting. Kris, AB in class of 93, and is on the Dean's Advisory Council for LS&A, and he and I serve together on the Economic Department Leadership Council, which is the advisory group for the Economics Department. Kris, your turn.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it. And really happy to be here today and to hear all of the interesting discussions about other parts of the economy. What I do think is really interesting, and what we'll hear on some of the things I share, is you're going to hear common themes from the retail industry and my observations that I think you would have heard in some respects in other industries. So the impact of the world and the environment we've been in, kind of amazing how broad spread that has been, and in some respects how consistent. Just a quick word: Bath and Body Works, mall-based, off-mall-based retailer in the United States and internationally, primarily focused on personal care products, so things like shower gels, perfumes, body lotions, and home fragrance products and home-related products, so things like soaps, sanitizers, candles, some of which obviously were right in the focus of need here in the past year. I've been with the company, L Brands, for about 20 years. So 20 years in retail, 15 at Bath and Body Works. And certainly a year unlike any other is what we've experienced. COVID, obviously a major, disruption to our operations, generating significant changes in today and likely in what we think we're going to see over the future. I can certainly tell you a year where you close all of your stores literally for a period of time and then reopen them all is not something you generally plan to start the year doing. And that's the type of impact that we had this year in the COVID environment. So if you think about some of the changes, you had changes in our store operations during the year, changes in customer interest. I mentioned things like soaps being even more of a necessity product in a COVID world, or sanitizers, than they would have been otherwise. Changes in the work environment, like many of the fellow panelists have described. So a lot of significant change. Some of them, we would think are temporary situations. So the idea of customers coming into our stores wearing masks, we would believe that that's a temporary situation. And obviously for a business like ours that's highly experiential, fragrance-based, that is an impediment for us to doing business. It's certainly not as easy to smell the fragrance of a candle through a mask as it is otherwise. So certainly, again, a big one that we think is kind of a temporary change. And certainly we think what we've experienced in the last year has accelerated some of the changes that were already happening. The most obvious one, and one that's talked about often with retail, is the move to more of an e-commerce based business. That's a transition that's been happening over the last several years. Certainly that was accelerated this year, in part obviously in a time period where physical stores themselves are closed. There's a perhaps one-time acceleration related to that. But even without that, we think that there's certainly some impact here that we believe is going to carry on, into the future. And would also say that we think there's impact to services offered by retailers. So obviously nobody knows exactly what the future holds, but a few specific things that I would want to highlight. We certainly think the way that we work is going to continue to evolve. The way we engage with vendors and business partners, maybe not always as much in person as it would have been in the past. Certainly some of it still will be. But also we think that, there are potential impacts to our work environments, as we have learned how to engage and conduct business in a different way. We certainly think that there are, potential changes to business environments that we would want to continue to think about and process. And then, as a variety of folks have also mentioned, the idea that technological change is going to, have an impact not just on the how we work, but the way we work and the way that we communicate. For example, in a business like ours, the way that we communicate with customers. Certainly a year of societal change, and we're no exception to that. And we believe as a business, and we expect businesses much more broadly to continue to take a more inclusive, socially conscious approach to business, more community involvement, factors around both from a people standpoint, but also an environmental standpoint, we think will continue to be a bigger factor than even they were, historically. I mentioned a minute or two ago about the idea of channel shift from in-person retail to more of an e-commerce focused retail. Again, we think that is a change that has been accelerated by COVID, a change that was already happening, and one that we expect to retain a foothold and be a change in the way that customers engage with our brand. We also think a business like ours, though, that our store channel is critically important. It's an experience-based business. We think we provide a unique store environment, store experience for our customers. And so we think that there's a balance in the future, and businesses that are best able to take advantage of that balance in the retail space are going to be the ones that are best positioned to win with customers going forward. But undoubtedly, kind of the many years into one in terms of a transition over the past year. Service expectations are something that in every industry will always continue to rise, but there are different types of services that we saw retailers offer in different degrees in this COVID-influenced environment that we think are also going to have a stronger foothold in retail as we go forward, and that a customer and customers will continue to expect even greater service levels and even faster service for a business like ours. So fast, convenient, more options, certainly going to be part of the mix. And this has been brought up a couple of times, and I think it's absolutely critical, is the idea of what we need from our teams, what we're expected to deliver is going to continue to change. A premium on flexibility, a premium on being able to adapt to rapid change. There's a level of change we've all just gone through that was different than what we would have seen in the past. And so we think we're going to need different thinking and a flexibility of thought, a sensitivity and breadth of thinking that is going to be different that's in the past, because we're going to be facing more complicated situations than those which we've faced in the past. And exciting to hear the types of backgrounds, the economics, the histories, those liberal arts, kind of thinking and challenging types of experiences and backgrounds like I have as well. I think those are the types of things and the thinking that you're taught, and that Michigan does such a good job of teaching and instilling, that we think our business is going to need more and more of as we move forward, without a doubt. And so, I'd close with, the idea that, like many others, we certainly think that there's a great future, but you have to be flexible to capitalize on it and leverage the strengths of your business into that future. And we're optimistic and excited to continue to try to meet those challenges as we move forward. And with that, I'll pass it back to David.
Kris, thank you. I expect that we will see each other in person on campus in the fall. I certainly hope so. Next speaker is John Anthony, another dual degree person from U of M, BSc class of 97, and MBA class of 06. And John is business unit director at Yazaki North America, a automotive technology supplier. John has been in the automotive technology area for 20 years. You hardly look old enough for that, John. You're up next. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you for your kind words. My kids remind me that I'm old. Maybe it's my grays, but I did turn 46 recently. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the automotive industry, and I want to talk about how Ohio plays an important place in the future of the auto industry, which a lot of people don't know about. First, I would like to say that I'm very grateful to Michigan. I'm grateful for the experience I had there. When I went to the Ross School of Business evening program, more than 50% of the class were engineers, and they were largely automotive engineers who went out to be leaders in the industry. And right now, Ross has about 48% engineers in their evening program. So I'm grateful for that program. It really molded and it helped us to think about what was coming in the future, but the disruption that was coming, we really weren't ready for. In Ohio right now, there are about 599 automotive manufacturing facilities and establishments. Most of the companies that have establishments here in Ohio, of course, are from the Detroit area. And in the Detroit area, it's largely Michigan grads and the influence of the University of Michigan that's guiding those institutions. Now, back in Ohio, they have branch offices and they're supporting GM, FCA or Stellantis, Honda, of course, right here in Central Ohio, Navistar, PACCAR. So there are a number of finished good corporations or a number of smaller suppliers right here in the industry. In Ohio also, we're the #2 producer of automobile components in North America. People don't know that because there's a lot of focus on moving to the South. And there's a lot of focus on moving to the coast, to the West Coast, because of the growth of Tesla and Lucid and the EV automakers. What I want to say, though, is that Ohio is really poised for this future that is coming. So if you look at the alliances that are starting right now, I mentioned Honda. Right now in Marysville, as we speak, Honda's producing hybrid electric Accords about 40 miles away from downtown. In addition, we've got Honda producing a hybrid supercar, the NSX, right there. Honda has realized, and the whole industry has realized, that in order to prepare for the electrification that's coming, there's gonna need to be more partnerships. So Honda and GM last year announced an alliance where they're gonna be working on not just hybrid vehicles, but they're gonna be working on EV. And electric vehicles, we know, is the future. It's coming. The industry has been waiting for the battery technology to get to where it needs to be. We've been waiting for material sciences to get us to the lighter vehicles. We've been waiting for the computing powers and the AI to help us with some of the onboard technologies that are needed. So Honda's partnering. We're also seeing that you have Bendix in Elyria that is partnering with a former Eaton subsidiary. You have into the Maumee area, you have Dana acquiring $300 million worth of new companies in order to build EV trucks. So you have all of this going on in the industry with the partnerships, but you also have some standalone companies that are starting up. In Northern Ohio, we also have Lordstown Motors. Many people talk about Tesla and Lucid, they talk about Rivian, but Lordstown is going to be producing a full-size truck for, not for commercial use, but it'll be sitting in between light truck and commercial use. It has motors inside of all 4 wheels, and they're reusing the Lordstown GM automotive factory. So that's a really good thing for Ohio to see that you can have a startup here in Ohio. In addition, it's not just the collaboration that's happening with large traditional companies like GM and Honda. You also see that in Ohio, we have collaboration between government and between education and between industry. So one of the really good examples is right here in downtown Columbus, where you have the Smart Columbus Autonomous Shuttle Zone. And that was the first autonomous bus zone in a major city in the United States. And in order to pull off something like this, there were a number of automakers who were involved and a number of technology companies, and all are hoping to learn a little bit more about how do we do this? Are we prepared for this autonomous vehicle future? What are the safety implications? What are the implications to the way that we design cars? Maybe cars don't need to be as heavy. Maybe we don't need as much material in them. What kind of communication is needed between the car and the infrastructure? What kind of computing speeds do we need? And a big change that's happening as well is what kind of engineers do we need for the future? In the past, you would focus so much on engineers who maybe worked on the ICE, the combustion engine. Now you need to have more software engineers. So that's going to change the way that we do our hiring as well. We may be hiring more software engineers who don't need to be in the Detroit area. They don't need to be in California, which we're finding is really expensive to send our young engineers to. Maybe they can be right here in Central Ohio. So that's a trend that I think is going to pick up. But also with the collaboration on I-33 heading out towards Marysville, there's the smart mobility corridor. And that's another interesting collaboration because you've got not just Honda and the commercial vehicle groups, but you also have 70 automotive suppliers working together on this, looking to see, can we have not just vehicle to vehicle communication? Can we have vehicle to infrastructure communication so that trucks can run down the road by themselves? So in the future that we're looking at, it may not just be that we're looking at past cars, driving by themselves, but the Uber that you drive, the taxi that comes to pick you up, and all of your Amazon deliveries may be coming from some autonomous vehicle. But in order to prepare for that, again, the automakers and the suppliers are realizing they can't go it alone. They need to partner and they need to be learning from others. So that's what we've been working on in the auto industry. Ohio's been right in the middle of it. And I think, as I wrap up, what I want to say is that there's a lot of opportunities for Michigan alums to help this automotive future happen and help it to come. Really promoting internship and mentor programs that really helps out, but also being open to collaboration with peer companies and with governments and with the cities. That really will help as well. So thank you very much, David. That's it for me.
John, thank you. We have a real treat for our last speaker, our cleanup hitter for tonight, the Honorable Michael B. Coleman, who's partner in charge of the government practice at ICE Miller. We all know him better as the 4-term mayor of Columbus. Mr. Mayor, knock us all in.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Oh, very good. Thanks for inviting me. Glad to be here. Little quick story. I was accepted to attend undergraduate school at the University of Michigan. I grew up in Toledo, Ohio, of all places. And University of Michigan was very close to my home. And I think there was the only reason I didn't go there because it was that close to my home. And way too close. So I went away and went somewhere else, but good to be here. Since I'm the last, I learned that it is always good to follow the 5 words of be brief, brother, be brief. So that's what I will do today. First, let me say that my topic is really just to talk about collaboration and what's next. Well, first, let me say that collaboration is more of an adventure. Collaboration with business and government is an adventure. It is not a science, it's an art. Collaboration isn't 1 + 1 = 2. It is trying to figure out what the one is, and then if you add 3, and then you add another one, what does that represent? And so it is difficult to collaborate. People talk about it all the time. And the truth is, Columbus does have a collaborative spirit and a culture that was developed over time. But most communities do not in the country. And I will go so far to say, as government and business are not natural allies. They are not necessarily enemies. But it's hard for those two to come together, to work together, because they come from different points usually. But the truth is, in my view, that frankly, between government and business, there's more in common than there are differences that exist. Business wants to see job creation, so does government, cities. Business want to see expansion and opportunities, well, so does government. And then there on the government side, there's the common good of the people, the social benefit, the housing, the wages, healthcare, all those things add up to the common good. But the truth is they have to work together because I think they're tied at the hip, business and government. One cannot survive without the other. And what happens here is that whenever business and government go their separate ways, or one gets out too far ahead of the other, which happens a lot in communities. I've seen it even happen in Columbus, when they're not really trying to align themselves on some issues, the economy suffers and the people suffer as a result. But I've seen it too much around the country. And working to align is really important for social and economic policy and other reasons. So I think about what's going to happen going forward. And I see, frankly, that there's a BC and an AC. Before COVID and after COVID, the world's going to change, and we need to change with it. I always say the cities that don't change fall behind. And I say that for businesses too. Businesses that don't change will fall behind. Blockbuster and Netflix are two forms of businesses. One changed and one didn't. Detroit, I hate to say this, Michigan, at one time was considered the center of the universe when it came to growth and opportunities. And I saw a magazine article from a 1965 Look magazine, and it had it was about urban communities, and the communities that were working and the communities that weren't, and then the top 25 cities in the nation. The larger population ones were the cities that were working the best. And the #1 city, according to Look magazine in 1965, was a city by the name of Detroit that was over 2 million people. And I was envious as the mayor back then, back in the whenever it was, back in the 2012 or whatever it was, and 15, because the magazine, if you know Look magazine, it has big pictures. And I saw the mayor of Detroit standing on a tall building, looking out before his subjects and before the city, and a big picture in Look magazine, and talked about the greatness of the city. And then it listed in that same article all the cities that were considered great in 1965, Detroit was considered number one. The city of Columbus wasn't even on the page. And now here we are in the year 2021. Columbus is now the 14th largest city. And Detroit is less than 600,000 people. We're approaching 1 million people, if we're not a million even today. We have maybe 100 people coming to the city every day because of all the good work you all are doing, and I'm sure that's well appreciated. But I think the issues going forward, I think have really all been touched on. We have to be a different city, a different community, and a different business community after COVID in every respect, or we will not survive. And we have to change. We not be competitive as a community, but it will require collaboration, require working together. So the big issues, I think, are, again, tax structure is going to be critical. How is that going to, what's going to happen here? Because the city of Columbus has relied a great deal upon income tax. And that's what really has brought the business community and the city together, because when income tax grows, that means jobs grow. Income tax grows, our budget grows, and we have to make sure that business expands. Well, after COVID, there might be more of an effort for folks to stay home that don't necessarily live in the city. And the question becomes, what happens to the revenue of the city in such an event? Kenny sort of alluded to that, but that is going to be a big statewide issue that needs to be addressed. I think going forward, there's going to be an intentionality that's going to be required between business and government to figure it out, because life's going to be different. Business is going to be different. Expectations are going to be different. Industries are going to be different. And I think that cities and business need to be right now talking about the comeback strategy of our community after COVID. And understanding that there will be a difference after COVID. All the big things that have been done in this city for the past 20 years have been a collaboration between business and the private sector. The downtown effort, Columbus Commons, South of Mile, South of Peninsula, the Short North, Franklinton, King Lincoln District, all those areas have improved dramatically because there was a relationship between and a working together of both private sector and business, but it was intentional. And I think that the challenge going forward is to maintain an intentionality to understand what's going to change and how we react as a community as a result. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. Not to mention the Arena District as part
The
of
Arena District, of course.
Public-private partnerships that really worked.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. So I'd like to thank all the speakers, but I'm going to turn it over to Eric right now.
Hi, sorry about that there. Hey, thank you, David, for leading us through this discussion. And thank you all for our guest speakers for your contributions today. It was really a wonderful discussion, and I really appreciate your comments. I'd like to thank John Anthony, Michael B. Coleman, Kris Kramer, Mike Mahaffey, Steve Markovich, Kenny McDonald, Jim Merkel, and Elizabeth Moji for your time and your insightful comments. And thanks to all of you who took the time to join us today. So while we don't have time for a Q&A session, please look out for an event survey in the next couple of days and include your question there, and we will try to get it answered for you by one of the panelists. So please look out for that. And also, we would love to know what kinds of events you would enjoy in the future. And so with that, please have a great evening. Thanks again for joining us, and go Blue.